Hello, welcome to a Has TV video, and today is another episode of Ultimate Future World Season 5. Now, I tried recording a video, however the video file's corrupted. So, yeah, the map might look different from the last episode. That's because a video happened between it, but that video no longer exists. However, let's get into it. So the first thing that happens is a group. So, in Russia, a civil war starts up between Russia and the Soviet parliamentary group. So, to begin with, the Soviet parliamentary group actually did really well, even getting more groups just pop up. And now this Soviet parliamentary group is to do with before the Russian Revolution, before the Soviets got in charge. That's where they're from. And now they're trying to regain power after the second Russian Revolution. So this is the third Russian Revolution on this timeline. So they actually do really well. They do struggle to make some landings just because they don't really have a navy. However, they take as a paint bucket tool. Okay. So they end up taking the entire eastern side of Russia, and they just carry on moving to Moscow in a large group. And they eventually take Moscow, and they end up completely annexing it. And they move the capital to Kiev. Oh no. Why are these? Right, I don't know what my brother's doing. He's listening to Christmas music when it's September. Okay, alright. Anyways, so this becomes the Soviet Union. Anyways, so the Latin Union declares war on Brazil, and Uruguay moves up, takes the capital, and just carries on moving up the coast. But they eventually get stopped by troops. Brazil, I think Guyana was here, so Brazil takes Guyana, but Venezuela doesn't care. Okay, right. Right. Nice. Brazil eventually signs a peace treaty, and they become a puppet state of the Latin Union. Mali then went to war with the Latin Union, and Ghana and the Republic of the Gambia took a lot of land and signed a peace treaty where they basically just get the land they took. And then Britain tries to take over India. However, they didn't want to take over India, or mainland India. Well, not mainland, this part of India. But they want Sri Lanka, Bengal, and parts of Burma. So they start their conquest with Sri Lanka and take it. And then they try with Bengal and they take it. And then they try with Burma and they do very well. And then they start using guerrilla warfare. Well, Burma does. However, they just carry on moving in and they don't take the entire thing, but they still do get a bit of land out of it. So then they turn it into a puppet state. Called British India. And they become a puppet state. So the next thing that happens is the Soviet Union declares war on the Nordic Treaty. So they move into Finland and they actually do really well. Even taking that, whatever that peninsula is called. And they get stopped there in Finland. And then they move into the part that Sweden, the part of Europe Sweden owns, well, mainland Europe. And completely take it. And they even take Copenhagen. So they sign a peace treaty. So this is what the peace treaty looks like. They profit. Sweden basically gets to keep all the land except for in mainland Europe and Svalbard, but they become a puppet state, and the Soviet Union creates Austria, which is the old Swedish part of mainland Europe. And I guess Sweden is part of mainland Europe. I guess across the Baltic Sea from Europe. No, Sweden. The Soviet Union set up a puppet state, which is Austria. And then in Korea, a revolution happens that turns the Republic of Korea to the Kingdom of Japan. And then Japan declared war on China. They take Taiwan and the northern part of the Philippines. They take whatever this island is called. And they also take, let's say, Hong Kong's there and Macau's there. And then they carry on moving in. They move up the coastline. They make a landing there. And then start moving down the coastline. And then they move into the whatever this valley is called. I know there's a valley here, but I don't remember what it's called. So I'm just going to call it the valley. They move into the valley and just completely take it. They carry on moving north and take Beijing, the old capital of China. Then they take the modern capital. And and sign a peace treaty. So this is what the peace treaty looks like. Japan just got most of the coastal regions, but China got to keep some of it. But China still gets to keep their independence. However, the Soviet Union then declares war on the Republic of China and Tibet because they want more land. They want living space or
Жилое пространство.
in Russian. Apparently that's living space in Russian. Anyways, they move a lot of troops into the Tibetan plateau, however they are halted. Because it's a very steep mountainous area that can get very cold. However, they do push into China with ease. However, they do sign a peace treaty with them, and they get to stay independent. Japan then made a landing in Burma and start to invade it, and they do it really well, even though there is a lot of jungle. And that is because, well, they have no reason to be good at invading the jungle. They just are. And then they eventually just end up taking Burma. They then went to war with Indonesia. Well, China did get involved, and well, it doesn't turn out so good for them. They're probably gonna end up losing on the coastline. However, they end up taking Borneo and the Malay Peninsula from Indonesia and the southern Philippines. And Japan's empire is slowly growing over time. And now, to combat this, countries in Asia, or that rely on Asia, is trying to ask the Soviet Union and the Ottoman Empire for help, as they are the two strongest countries. So Britain, because they rely on India for trade, their colony in India for trade. China and Tibet makes sense. Indonesia as well. Even New Zealand and Caledonia is asking for help against the Japanese in case of an invasion of their country. Now the Soviet Union really doesn't care, and the Ottoman Empire is too busy in Africa doing stuff like invading Niger. And then completely annexing them. However, then turning them into a puppet state. Called the Ottoman African Company. So they set up another company and land for that company to do trade within countries of Africa. Like the Ottoman Indian Company is set up for trade across the Indian Ocean. I'm pretty sure they don't really need it. Well, I guess the Ottoman Empire doesn't really need trade because they have the Atlantic and the Mediterranean and a lot of Africa to trade with. However, they kindly asked Chad if they could join, if the Ottoman African Company could own them, and well, when Chad said no, they said, we will fire and invade your capital and forcefully take you. So they said yeah, and so they joined it. However, so they didn't have to join the Ottoman African Company. Other countries started joining the African Commonwealth, like Angola, Benin, and Mali. Libya gave some land very willingly, in quotation marks, willingly. They were 100% forced to. Because it's the Ottoman Empire, they think they own the place. And they can. I mean, I guess they are the strongest country. Or would the Soviet Union be stronger? Well, the Ottoman Empire probably would be stronger. Soviet Union's too new. Anyways, the Ottoman African Company becomes really vital for the Ottoman Empire. And however, they want to do more trade in the Americas specifically. However, there's no place they can set up a company, as everywhere is basically in an alliance or already owned by somebody. So they have to very kindly ask Britain if they could have a part of British Canada, and surprisingly the British said yes. So basically the Ottoman Empire gets that out of it, mostly because that's not really land Britain wants. To Britain it's useless, and it provides no industry for them. However, then the Ottoman Empire finds oil, and Britain asks for it back, and well, the Ottoman Empire says no. So this is the Ottoman North American Company, which very quickly changed its name to the Ottoman Great Lakes Company. So the Ottoman Empire is still continuing to expand their influence, let's say. And then they declare war on Montana. No reason. They just want more of the Great Lakes. But that none of the allies get involved because they don't want to be owned by a company that isn't, or if it's like any of the other company, will use illegal techniques. When I say illegal, I mean UN illegal, which yes, the UN would actually exist as the Korean War has happened. So the UN does exist, and they have made laws that people will break, like the Ottoman Empire, because they kind of own it, or run it. They then go after Florida, which Montana, which nobody else once again gets involved in. And they basically just carry on moving down until they hit there, which they signed a peace treaty, and once again changes their name again to the Ottoman Virginia Company. However, that will be the end. So this is the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe. Go to hazardtv.co.uk for some Hazard TV merch. And until next time, peace.